Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Boston University Careers in Fundraising and Philanthropy webinar. It's wonderful to see so many of you logging in to attend today for our live session and to learn about the careers available to fundraising professionals and hear from our panel of BU instructors about their current positions in the field. My name is Sarah, and I will be moderating today's session alongside our presenters. We have a very engaging session planned for you today, and we welcome our audience to ask questions after our career panel discussion. We will also address your fundraising questions at the end of the presentation during a brief questions and answer session. As well, today's webinar is being recorded, and a link will be sent to your email for your reference, so you can also share with colleagues. Here's our agenda for the rest of the presentation. We will be going over what is professional fundraising. So John will provide an overview there. What does a career in fundraising and development involve? The job outlook of professional fundraisers. We will then dive into the larger portion of our presentation, which is words from our panelists, where our BU instructors will talk about their careers in the fundraising field. And then we will wrap up with talking about the professional fundraising certificate offered at Boston University. All right, I would now like to introduce the Professional Fundraising Program Director and today's host, John Schaffrath. As the Regional Director and Senior Development Officer at the Harvard Business School, John has spent many years in alumni engagement, annual funds, volunteer management, and major gifts, just to name a few key areas. John completed the BU fundraising program himself in 2007 and has been instructing for the past 8 years. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that kind introduction. So first, I wanted to open this session up with a big thank you to everyone who's attending and who's listening later. Philanthropy is a major driver to much of the good that happens in this country and around the world, and it is heartening to have so many people interested in learning how they can contribute through their career or through their volunteer service to this effort. So thank you for joining us. I look forward to sharing with you the next hour or maybe slightly less. So I'll start, what is professional fundraising? So what's really interesting is that it's professional. So I've been doing this for about 15 years, and we sort of spend a lot of time talking about philanthropy, and we read articles about major donations being made to institutions of higher learning, to causes when there's a disaster, to peace around the world. And often we sort of look at the philanthropists, but not necessarily the profession behind it. And so what's interesting is that we sit as professional fundraisers in this important position that connects philanthropists, those who have both the capacity and resources to give and the passion to be supportive, and the institutions that are doing the good work. And our job is to connect these folks, to prioritize the needs and wants of impact of the philanthropists and connect it to the priorities of the organization that we're representing. I think, it's an industry that continues to professionalize. I think philanthropists continue to become more sophisticated in the way that they're giving, which is also added to the industry. And it's expanding internationally. So philanthropy has been a common term for a long time in the United States for sure. But many countries where they might have relied on government funding or other resources in the past are now looking to private philanthropy as a way of making their organizations run. So we'll get into a little bit of this with our panel, but that's sort of a bit of a starting point. And as we sort of look into the field a bit, I think what's interesting as professionals in this field is, we often talk about the head and the heart when we're trying to get individuals to give, but I also think there's a lot of head and heart when we think about pursuing this career, fundraising as a career. The heart is that we have the opportunity to work for organizations that are really making a difference in the world and making a difference on people. And so the opportunity to work for a mission-driven organization is really, really significant and should be an important part of the way that you think about your career. I think, you look at the head too, and the head is what is interesting in terms of it's an expanding field. As you see some of these notes here in terms of growth, in terms of wages, in terms of opportunity at the higher end as you excel or grow in your career. I think that makes it very attractive as a place to go and work and build a career that can support your life, your lifestyle, family, all of that, and maybe even afford you the opportunity to be a philanthropist as well. And then I can't help but just point to that last column. Satisfaction, I think, based on a lot of the heart part of the work as well, is really high in this field. So it's a great place to be. And most places that you will go work, part of what's interesting too is we have a great group of peers and colleagues, and I think the nature of the work lends itself to ongoing learning, and both in formal ways like through BU, but also informal ways from colleagues and people building your network of fellow fundraisers. People are very open in this field to connecting, which I think is great. Speaking of the field, sort of what it looks like, and there's lots of different aspects of fundraising that you can go into. One of the top line jobs that people come across is often the individual giving officer, whether it's in major gift or leadership giving or plan giving. But there's also a whole suite of jobs in the field that are incredibly important that support the fundraising function, whether it be prospect research or special events, database management, gift processing. I think one of the takeaways that I often have when I go through with a new group of students each session at BU is that many don't think of the different entry points into this field. They tend to think of just that, frontline fundraiser. And for many, that's not actually what they want to do, but it's what they hear about. So this course and sort of the field generally know that it's actually pretty expansive in the ways that you can build a career and contribute. It goes across, while we're talking about fundraising as an industry, it goes across a lot of different industries: healthcare, higher education, nonprofits, international NGOs, political. There's sort of a whole gamut of institutions that you can be a fundraiser for based on your interests and passions and skill sets. Just on the next slide, it is a good time to be looking at this field. Obviously, it's a decent time if anyone, particularly here in the U.S., looks at unemployment numbers and the economy. It's a decent time to find a job generally. But the statistics on growth in fundraising are pretty strong right now. It's definitely a need, and as I mentioned, many international organizations are turning towards private philanthropy, so there's a need there as well. And we also have, a group of individuals who had, been sole fundraisers for organizations, and there's sort of a retirement sort of boom going on a bit, which I think will lead to more pipeline and growth of opportunities. And if you go to the next slide, again, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but just for you to have a sense of, what the financial opportunity is in this career. Again, noting that there's a wide range of types of jobs in the field, and that these, are averages in terms of what people could make, both here in the U.S. And if you go to the next slide, we also have some data on the United Kingdom and how, sort of highs and lows on what might be expected in the field.
Great. Thank you so much, John, for the overview of the field itself. At this time, we will now go into our panel discussion with our instructors, Kelly, Teresa, and Ellen. And as just a reminder to our audience, please be sure to ask questions either throughout the career discussion, but we will address all of those questions at the close of the panel as well.
Great, thank you. So as I said, this field is filled with great colleagues, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to Kelly, Teresa, and Ellen, who are joining us today, each with varied background. Kelly here comes from the healthcare arena, has been doing fundraising for a number of years. She's been a colleague here with me at BU for 2.5 years, although I think that might even be more. It feels like we go back a number of years. So thrilled to introduce Kelly. Along with Kelly, we have Ellen Sullivan, who is currently working at Phillips Academy in the Independent School, has a background also in international fundraising, so has helped put information throughout the BU course and helped me learn a lot about the work that she's done over time and sort of that opportunity. And this is actually her first year instructing with the BU course, so we're getting to know each other a bit as well. And lastly, but not leastly, let me introduce you to Teresa Lee, who has a great background in university fundraising, having held a number of leadership roles in advancement, and has been a part of this course for about 1.5 years, and has been a pleasure to get to know and learn from as well. So without further ado, I think we'll go to our back and forth on the panel, and I'm going to ask a first question that actually comes through my significant other. My wife is always having trouble introducing me and what I do at cocktail parties. So she's boiled it down to I informational interview for a living and then ask people for lots of money. I bet our panelists might have a better response to that. So, Teresa, could you kick us off by just sharing your sort of 1-minute cocktail party definition of what you do in fundraising?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. The first tip I have for you is hold your cocktail in your left hand, because you're going to be shaking with your right hand and you don't want it to be wet or occupied. So I'll start there. But if I'm asked, and I often am, what I do for a living, I tell people after a 25-year career in higher education fundraising, I don't use the word advancement because no one knows what that means, or development. In fundraising, I now have the opportunity to consult with nonprofits, small nonprofits, educational nonprofits, all sorts of them, to help them with strategic fundraising, operations, board development, data analytics, marketing, and many more things that I have learned over the past 25 years. And it is enormously satisfying to help teach others what I've been taught in my very long career with fabulous mentors and guides that I've enjoyed.
Thank you, Teresa. Left hand to cocktail, that's good.
That's right, yeah.
Telly, could you share how you would answer the question?
Am I off mute? Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thanks, Kelly.
All right, great. So hi, everyone. I have been in healthcare philanthropy now for over 20 years. And for me, what I always tell somebody in the field is that we are connecting donors and people who care about the health of their community to opportunities to not only give of their time and talent through volunteerism, but also an opportunity for them to have their philanthropic dollars support the needs and the health of members of their community. So I've worked for really large national organizations, and now am working in a healthcare system. And for me, I think what's really critical about the field and what I really talk to people about at that cocktail party or at a networking event with our Chamber of Commerce is it's really about building relationships with people who care about the growth of their community, be it in the arts community that they care about, or for me, working with people around the issues of healthcare. So again, the field really to me is about building those relationships and how you connect people philanthropically. So it's not just the giving of their dollars, but I also think giving of time and talent is really important, especially for organizations and communities that are also smaller and need that volunteer help.
That's great, Telly. Thank you. And Alan, welcome to the cocktail party. What would you say?
Thank you. Welcome to the cocktail party, all attendees. So it's hard to be the third one to answer the same question, but I work at an independent school, and I work with international parents and alumni. And I tell them my position exists to do two things. One, to strengthen the ties between the school and our international community. And two, to inspire philanthropy over time to support the Academy's mission. And usually in saying that to people whose kids go to the school or who went to the school themselves, that is sufficiently intriguing to learn more. So in my view, the idea is really, it's an invitation to involvement. It's not a hold your head down low and say, oh, well, I actually asked people for money. No, it's an invitation to involvement.
That's great. I love that. So I'll pick up on what you said a little bit. You know, one of the things you mentioned, Ellen, was sort of it's over a time horizon. So I think one of the challenges in this field can sometimes be you don't necessarily see the fruition of the important work that you're doing. Do you have any thoughts on how you stay motivated when you know that some of the work that you're doing is just so long term?
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes it can be long-term, especially if your aspiration is for a, 6 or 7 figure gift from this person who maybe has a lifelong engagement, or maybe it's a patron of the art center where you are the director of development. And I think what helps is to have a deep and abiding commitment to the organization, because there's a requirement of humility in this work. It is not about the fundraiser. The fundraiser is peripheral. The fundraiser is a conduit. It is about the belief in the art center or the children's program or the museum or the science center or the educational institution or the symphony. And that is what we are the conduits for.
That's great. I love that. Kelly, one of the things that you sort of mentioned as you were talking through is about networking events that you go to at the Chamber of Commerce. Was wondering sort of for this audience, how do you approach sort of networking and building those connections, both sort of new ones and solidifying or keeping up ones that you've had in the past?
Absolutely. So I think I am a huge believer in the fact that, as I said before, and I think all of us have alluded to this, it is philanthropy, and the field of philanthropy as a career is about building relationships long term and building an affinity with that donor or potential donor to your organization, but most importantly to the mission of the organization. If in an advent of things happening through social media, and I've gotten gifts through LinkedIn, which has been, great and wonderful. But where we really make a difference is being out in our community, talking about the benefits of our organization. I think in philanthropy, it's also important for us to be really tied into what is happening in the marketplace in our community. How is the business industry? What's happening with housing sales? And we need to stay on top of what's happening within our communities from an economic perspective, because that really helps to drive the relationships and the gifts that you get from corporate. So I am a huge believer in engaging with business organizations, be it Kiwanis, Rotary, your Chamber of Commerce. This business is about networking with individuals that come into your organization, either as members to a museum or, for me, grateful patients and their families, but also within the business community for people who care about the health of their community. So networking and building relationships, and I think to the point that was just talked about it might take years. And in fact, I'm sitting in my car at a rest stop because I just was at a gift meeting with somebody that we have been talking with organizationally for the last 3 years. And we are getting a commitment of a 6-figure gift for our capital campaign. And it's taken, a number of years and gifts of $1,000 to $5,000 over the last 15 years to the organization. And they are making this stretch gift, but it's taken us a long time to get that. But again, it's being out there, networking, and talking about the mission of your organization long before you make an ask.
Yes, for sure. Patience is critical. That's a transferable skill that we definitely look for.
Yes.
And we have to remind ourselves that that's important. Teresa, going to you, I've been so impressed by the different jobs you've had throughout your career. And I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about your thought, things that come to mind when you were considering a transition, going from one job to another. Why would you go from one institution to another, one position to another?
Well, transition decisions are always interesting. I'd say the number one thought on my mind is to grow and learn as a professional, both from the person hiring me. I've had the advantage of having wonderful mentors and role models that I've learned from. But I've also worked in some places where I've had tremendous colleagues. The things that I have learned from colleagues, not just who are my superiors, but who are my equal colleagues on the org chart, and sometimes people that I manage, quite often people that I manage who have an approach that is completely different than my own, but which works. So what I've seen over the years is completely different styles that work with many different kinds of donors. But back to the transition question, the other thing that I'm looking for is an organization that is true to its mission and has a great reputation among its constituents, that there is a following, that donors and volunteers are engaged in the organization, they care about it. Fundraising can be a challenging profession, but it's so much more joyful when you have an engaged constituency to fundraise with. And I think the third thing that I look for is, what's the health of the organization overall over years? In Boston, in higher education, we're a very connected community, and I've gotten involved professionally. And so it's not hard to learn and do a little homework about each of the different institutions in the city and learn where they are. And that's not a static thing. Organizations have changed dramatically with much different leadership over time. So one that perhaps didn't have a great reputation early on in my career now does. So I try to keep my network open and learn about what is going on at that institution at that time to make a decision about a transition.
That's great. Digging in a little bit onto one of the things you mentioned mentors, which is a topic that often comes up. How have you or can you give an example of identifying or pursuing a mentor? I think sometimes it's a little bit of an enigma to people on how that relationship works.
One of my mentors is on this panel, actually. Ellen Sullivan, who I worked with at Boston College, not only mentored me in the area of international fundraising, she's a very kind and generous professional, but she offered to mentor my annual giving staff there as well. And she would take each of them, many of whom this was an entry-level position, and just take them out for coffee or lunch and tell them what her area was about. But here's the other thing. Ellen was also seeking to learn from them about annual giving to make herself a better professional. So I think it's hard to seek out a mentor. I think what you want to do is align with people who share your value system and from whom you have something to learn. And the example of Ellen and the annual giving staff shows you that mentorship is not just up the organization, it can be around the organization, that she saw something that she could learn and also saw as an experienced professional that she had something to share with our annual giving staff.
That's great. So I think that calls you out, Ellen, for the next question. And I'm going to pivot slightly. I'm so inspired by how you got into fundraising. So I was wondering if you could share with this group how you approached getting your first job in fundraising.
Sure, I will. And just in case anyone has the impression from Teresa's very kind comments that I'm really old, I'm not that old.
Sorry, Ellen.
But anyway, so my first job in fundraising, this is actually a fun story. So first job in fundraising was at Harvard University, but I was already employed by Harvard for 8 years, having worked in the college admissions office. And this kind of taps into another question, John, you asked us to think about regarding transferable skills. So whenever I meet people in the world of education who say it's really hard to find a fundraiser, I want to say it's not that hard. Go look in your admission office, because your admission officers are trained to know the institution inside and out. They know all the data. They've worked with volunteers who might be interviewing students or serving on alumni committees. And all of these experiences are directly translatable to the world of advancement or fundraising. So I actually got my first job in the Harvard Development Office, not because I had one red hot minute of credible professional fundraising experience, but because I knew the institution well and could speak about it. And I had volunteered with Habitat for Humanity because I believed in the organization, and I realized what they wanted me to do was fundraise. And I actually didn't know anything about fundraising. So I took a course on grant writing, which, by the way, is a great skill to have. And I became the chair of the fundraising committee for Habitat for Humanity Boston. This was in the 90s. And it was that fundraising experience that I spoke about at Harvard that got me my first fundraising job at Harvard.
Thank you, Ellen. I think that you touched on exactly what I was hoping, this sort of sense of transferable skills and how one puts them forward with the confidence that they will fit the needs of an organization as a fundraiser, even though the hiring manager might not say that explicitly. Telly, turning the page a little bit further, you mentioned in passing that you at least raised one gift, probably a few, off of LinkedIn. I was wondering if you might share anything that you're seeing in sort of the social media space that's been sort of new or sort of trending for you.
Absolutely. So, again, I wanted to preface this by saying being out in your community, face-to-face with people is the way you get this job done. But you can't ignore what social media is able to do in terms of connecting you to people. So I will give you a couple of examples that have happened just in the last 2 years because I moved to a new state and I'm working in a community that is new to me. So I have had to network in a really different way. And social media has allowed that to happen, particularly LinkedIn. So I was able to connect to some people whose name I had heard often at chamber meetings, and I just would connect to them on LinkedIn and would send them a message and have been able to secure meetings with them. One of these folks is now a new incoming board member, and it's a company that we have already a $25,000 commitment with. Another person is serving on another committee, but he is somebody who has a weekly column in our newspaper and is able to promote our events for us, which is fantastic. But the one story that just absolutely cracks me up, and again, I've been doing this for over 20 years, is our construction company had posted a picture of the new parking garage that's going up as part of a massive $32 million capital project on our hospital campus. So I forwarded that as a post on my page and mentioned this cancer center we're building. Somebody from a pharmaceutical company tagged somebody in the comments of my picture. So of course I'm like, well, who's this? I clicked on his name to learn who he was, connected to him, sent him a message to say, I'd love to talk to you about this project. We got a meeting. They're looking to grow their service line in our state. And now they're a sponsor of a brand new event we have that's supporting the cancer center. So you never know what's going to happen through a networking event or through social media. But it is a really great way to keep your mission front and center with your network of people and with your community through things like Facebook or Instagram. So as much as you can have social media be the connection to your community and sharing the mission part of what you do, it's a huge benefit. But again, in this field, you need to be out there talking with people that you know or that your volunteers or donors can help open further doors.
That's great, Kelly. I love how you talk about the two sort of supporting each other, the face-to-face and the sort of social media piece of it. I think that's definitely the way to go. I think so. Maybe I'll have two more questions as wrap up. So I'll open this to all three of you. If I was trying to apply for a job or get a job interview, any 51-liners, things that have worked for you to get in the door?
John, I'll take that. I've interviewed and hired many people over the years. And I think two things that I'm looking for is people who have done their homework about the organization and even about me personally. Of course, that's a nice ego stroke for whoever you're talking to. But I'm looking for energy, fire in the belly. That's something you cannot teach people. I'm looking for curiosity. I would say if you're in an interview situation and you get asked, do you have any questions? The worst thing you can say is, no, I think you've answered everything. There must be more questions. So curiosity in this business is paramount because you're going to be in front of prospects and your job is to ask questions. I'm also looking for people who are good listeners, paying attention, maintaining eye contact while we're having a conversation, who attend to detail, and that detail can include things like mentioning, oh, I saw on your website. That lets me know you've done your homework, and it also lets me know that you've remembered something perhaps important to our conversation. If you don't know something, admit that. So the humility aspect of it, something that when you're in front of a prospect and you get asked a question that you can't answer, never ever make something up, but always say, that's an excellent question. I'd love to get back to you when I know more about that. So that shows me you have a humility about learning. And someone who is personable. I had a colleague walk in the door at Boston College for a position we were trying to hire for a long time. And she barreled through the door, stuck her hand out, and she said, you must be Teresa Lee. And she just, gave me a few lines about myself, and it pushed me back. And she just came with such wonderful energy that I immediately loved her. And then I kind of forgot that we were even in an interview. So she just disarmed me with charm from moment one.
I love that. Catch them off guard, but with all really all positive things. I think that's wonderful. So I think let's go down the panel with this last question. And it's sort of a two-part. One, how has ongoing learning played a role in your career in fundraising? And then tied to that, you all have been so generous in teaching others through the BE program. And what does that mean to you? And I know those are kind of big questions, but feel free to answer them narrowly. We'll start with you, Ellen, our newest member.
Sorry, John, I heard the first part about ongoing learning in your career. I didn't catch the second part.
The second part of that is why have you chosen to teach with BU?
Well, they're both related. So my particular field of international fundraising, I guess you could call it a bit of a niche field. So it's certainly been around in the US for 20 years, but anyone who's done it for 20 years or more is sort of an oldie in the field. And so one way I keep fresh and informed is by an informal convening of colleagues in this work that I organize every year in New York City. So I find a colleague who has a posh campus. This year it's Fordham at Lincoln Center. And there are 40 of us gathering on a Friday in August, all people who do international fundraising from Carnegie Mellon, William and Mary, Deerfield Academy, all across the landscape. University of Chicago is coming. And it's a really valued convening for all of us because it's hard to find concentrated expertise on this topic. There are questions about currency controls and how much money a person from India can take out of India in any given year. Same controls apply for China, and that's a rapidly changing landscape. So coming together with colleagues who do this particular work is really rewarding, professionally fulfilling, and it's just a really great experience. The reason that I wanted to teach in this course is similarly, I wanted to sort of push myself to stay on the leading edge of the field. And while I feel I have command of my small domain of international, I don't have command of all the other domains that my colleagues Kelly and Teresa and the other instructors do. So I thought I'd love to be challenged by the students in the course. And so I invite everyone who's listening to imagine themselves as students in the course.
Thank you, Ellen. Kelly?
So for me, what was great was I was introduced to this program attending a Massachusetts Association fundraising professionals event. And in a job that I had at the American Cancer Society, one of the things that I did was design curriculum for training for Relay for Life volunteers and staff across the country and conducted training. And I really missed it. So it was just kismet to be able to meet her at this conference and to be able to come in and get back to that whole kind of training type role. And it's been a great experience because I have learned so much from my colleagues being in different aspects of philanthropy because I've been in healthcare for over 20 years. So it's great to get different best practices that I can take and tweak and tailor for our field and being in a hospital environment. And I learned so much from the students reading through their posts on the discussion boards or the questions that they ask has been really great. The other thing that I love is over the last couple of semesters, we've had a lot more folks who are looking to make a career transition into philanthropy, and to be able to talk about what this field means to our communities and to the mission of the organizations really has been inspiring and really exciting. Back in 1992, when I graduated with a degree in political science, I knew I wanted to go into nonprofit work and was able to tailor my master's program, which was a master's in public administration. I took a focus on nonprofits. So to see programs like this that can help give people a start in the career, help them to advance in a career that they might have been working in for some time, really has been great. It's really been a privilege to be part of this, and I think we all need to continue to learn. So, getting those, like things like the Chronicle of Philanthropy and finding really great online resources for different best practices and what's happening in the field is really important, and all of us share that through this course. We'll post articles that are interesting to us that support each of the modules that we teach. So again, I think what I love about this field is the diversity within it, and that's what this program brings to in terms of the diversity of the students and all of us on the faculty, and really that sharing and connectivity. It's really been a great opportunity.
Thank you, Kelly. And Teresa, I'll give you the last word on this, and then we'll open it up to the group for questions.
Well, I wish I had this course at the start of my career so I could appreciate the breadth and the depth of all of the different professional opportunities in advancement, in fundraising and development. What I love about teaching is getting the energy from the students, sharing that energy back, watching students connect with one another. There are literally students from all over the world in this course, and everyone has a slightly different perspective depending on the nonprofit that they represent or where they are in their career progression, be that just entering. We've had, when I first started, there was a 17-year-old who knew that she wanted to get into this line of work. Most people in this line of work will tell you that they fell in backwards, that they weren't that intentional. So that really impressed me. But we have people from all levels who are sharing and connecting and creating their own community of ongoing learners and want to stay connected well past the course. Consider that if there are 30 people in your cohort through this course, you automatically have that network representing nonprofits, big and small, higher education, human services, secondary schools. It's really impressive. And the information that you're going to take in, you couldn't possibly keep it all in your head, but you will be given exposure to wonderful information, wonderful instructors, generous people who are willing to help you join this field that we love so much.
Thank you, Teresa. All right, let's turn it over. Sarah, can you manage, maybe we'll do 5 minutes of questions or so, depending on what comes through. And if you read off the questions, I can direct it to one of our panelists. And Kelly, Teresa, and Ellen, let's keep our responses relatively brief so that we can answer all the questions that we have.
All right, great. Thank you all. So the first question we just had come in is, what advice do you have for someone already in the development field who is trying to decide what type of continued education path to take? Examples are CFRE versus MBA versus any other master's level degree.
All right, I'll start that one with you, Teresa.
I would say take this course, but I think, you have to decide what area of advancement you're seeking. There are such varied roles. If you're going to be in research, perhaps a degree in, an MBA, or if you're seeking to be in management. If you don't know, a course like this does offer a wide variety of information for you to consider. And, there's nonprofit master's programs everywhere. That's another opportunity for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question we have is, any advice on how to break through the HR black hole when you don't have connections and are trying to apply for a development position?
Let's turn that to Kelly or in Kelly's network. Any thoughts on that?
I think what's really important is if there's an organization that you really want to work for, volunteer for them. That's actually how I came into philanthropy as a career in nonprofits. I started my career as a program manager for tobacco control programs way back in the early 90s, and I was a volunteer for the American Cancer Society. And the area director talked to me just based on personality and the things I was volunteering for. She's the one who approached me saying, we have a job that you really should take a look at. So volunteering and getting to know people within the organization is really important. It's definitely a challenge in terms of, because so many large organizations now, you do go into the abyss of the online application, but if you can build some personal relationships with board members or volunteer at one of their events, I think that might be a great opportunity for you to get noticed with somebody.
Could I add?
Great, Kelly. Great tip.
Could I add a thought on that, John?
Yes, Ellen, please.
So I would encourage the job seeker to do a little research and figure out who the hiring manager is. So if you're applying for a job as Associate Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations, it's clear that the hiring manager is the Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations, and find out who she is and send your cover letter directly to her. And a little creative Googling will enable you to figure out what her email address is. And she will be quite impressed that your cover letter landed directly in her inbox. And then secondly, on the matter of the cover letter, don't think, should I write a cover letter? They didn't ask for one. This is a job in which all day long we are working hard to convince people to join us in our aspirations. And as a hiring manager, I would never hire anyone who doesn't submit a compelling letter, and I certainly wouldn't spend any time on someone who doesn't submit a cover letter at all, which actually happened earlier today.
I cannot agree with that more. This is Kelly. I think that is critically important, and in these jobs, communication is key, and being able to articulate your position and the mission of your organization, both in writing and verbally, is critical. And back to this, we talked about this earlier too, but it applies here as well. Do not underestimate the personal handwritten thank you note after your interview. That is how people rise to the top with me, as well as a well thought out cover letter. But for me, it is critically important that somebody follow up, not just with an email thank you, but a handwritten thank you note makes a huge difference. And do that with your donors over time too. That's important.
Thank you, Kelly. Sarah, do we have another question?
We do. So this next question, this person asks, is it possible for someone near 50 years old to build a career in professional fundraising? And do you have advice for someone of this age group?
Who would like to answer that one?
Go ahead.
Oh. This is Kelly. I would say absolutely. One of the things that I've seen over the course of my career hiring different folks into philanthropy positions is if someone has been in sales for their past career, they have a skill set that to me is critically important in working with donors and building those relationships and closing those gifts. So for me, there's so much diversity in this field that diversity of age and background makes our field much richer.
Thank you, Kelly. Sarah, is there another question, or should we wrap up this portion?
Just one more question and then we'll move on. So we have, this person asks, do most larger corporations have a planned giving or development office, or is it best for me to look for a career at a nonprofit organization specifically?
Ellen, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So I think the question was around whether organizations or institutions have planned giving offices. Is that right?
Yeah.
Not corporations, probably. In my experience, not very many small nonprofits have the capacity to have in-house expertise on planned giving. This is a fabulous skill to have. And if you had asked me what is one regret that you have of a skill you did not acquire early in your career, as my colleague Teresa obviously did, it would be planned giving. So that is something that can make you extremely valuable to a strapped small nonprofit who otherwise wouldn't be able to hire a planned giving person, but maybe you become the MVP for that organization because you bring that skill set.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. All right, and that seems to be all we have for questions at this time, John.
Terrific. Thanks so much. And thank you again to the panel for your participation today, your great teaching in the course, and your friendship and all that I learned from each of you. So thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Now, Sarah, do you want to take the quick program overview at this point?
Yep, I will dive into that. So because the educational component is such an integral part of the fundraising career development, as we heard from our panel of instructors here, I'd now like to just go over what the BU program has to offer in a brief high-level overview. So you can see here on this slide that this is indeed a instructor-led course, 12-week-long program. And this course will go over the different areas of fundraising and different modules. The course does award the 84 CFRE continuing education points that are needed to sit for the exam. Our program is asynchronous, of course, as we've just learned, taught by well-established experts in the field, as we've seen with Kelly, Teresa, and Ellen. And we also get perspectives from both the large and small shops in this course, so a little bit of both sides of the spectrum, as John was pointing out earlier. The approximate time commitment for this course is about 7 to 10 hours a week, though that does depend on people's work schedules. It is meant for flexible living, but that is sort of the medium point that we put on the slide here. And there is an optional 4 to 6 live sessions that people can take advantage of during throughout the course as well, where you can hop on basically a Zoom video, I believe that's right, John, and interact with your peers, with your instructors, and ask questions in live time. All right, did I miss anything there, John? Anything you'd like to add?
Nope, that sounds great.
All right. And so our next course is coming up rather soon. Our start date is September 3rd, 2019, but we do have courses that are held throughout the year 3 times a year. One course starting in January, one in May, and then this upcoming one here in September. And the enrollment deadline for that is August 9th. So that is also quickly approaching. You can see the tuition listed here as well for our certificate program at the Boston University fundraising program. And any additional information can be found on our website, which is listed here, which is onlineprofundraising.bu.edu. And there you'll be able to surf about the course itself, the different modules that are presented, and just a brief overview of what the program will offer in more detail. So if you do have any questions or would like to register, you can contact our enrollment team either by email, telephone. We do have live chat as well on the website, and that is Boston University at mindmax.net. Telephone is listed here as well, 617-502-8822, and our enrollment team is happy to either answer questions or help you through the enrollment process as well. All right, and so with that, we now have a general questions and answers session that we'd like to open up to the panel for the next couple of minutes before the close of the webinar, either for our instructors, if you didn't get a chance then to ask a question, program-specific questions, anything of that like. So I do have one question I'll start us off with here, and this I think goes back to more of our career panel as well. This is, what is one skill you wish you had earlier in your development career that you could have used at that time? And maybe Teresa, maybe I'll pass that off to you if you feel comfortable with that. Oh, are you there? Or Ellen, or anyone can.
Sorry, I was unmuting.
No, that's okay.
My bad. So the question was, what was something that I wanted earlier in my career for skills?
Yep. Yes.
I think it was to have the courage and the confidence to ask people, not just for money, that's one skill set, but I often think back about volunteers, and I would lowball my offer to them and say things like, well, just do what you think you can do. And I learned through the course of my career that when you want something from somebody, you need to ask them very directly and specifically what you want. And when you raise expectations with people, and this really is for fundraising or volunteers, you will often get it. For example, if you say to somebody, the expectation is that it's X amount of hours per week, and you're very specific in what you're expecting from them, they at that point have an opportunity to say yes or no to your offer. rather than being vague or lowballing it and then changing the game midway. And again, this can apply to fundraising, is you want to be clear and direct in your communication with people so that everybody understands what you're asking.
Oh, great answer. Thank you for that. John, I might direct this next question to you. This person says they're not seeking a career that centers on entirely fundraising, but rather looking to broaden their skills as a potential independent school leader. Do you think this course would serve that person well?
Oh, that is music to my ears. I love to hear an administrative leader who is interested in understanding fundraising. So I think that is one great fit for this course. It is not for everyone who is necessarily going to be, a direct fundraiser, but understanding the fundraising operation. I look at this as a bit of sort of a nuts and bolts that goes through each part of the operation so that an individual after the 12 weeks has a working knowledge of the language of fundraising, the different parts of the shop, and some best practice. And for an administrator, that can mean they then have the sense of the questions to ask their staff and their team, the ways to approach volunteers, and maybe also give a little bit of confidence if you're in the position where you're asking people for philanthropic resources as well. So I think that's a great fit, and I'd carry on to that we do each year sort of a separate category, but kind of similar. You have a number of people who will take the course who are volunteers or board members for organizations that they want to help grow and help resource. And that's been a nice fit in learning for a lot of the same reasons. They're not going to necessarily be professional fundraisers, but having a sense of the language and what fundraising is all about can be really helpful in their efforts with their organization.
Thank you so much, John. The next question, in your opinion, which sector, that being healthcare, education, et cetera, is the most rewarding and appealing in which to be employed? And I'm not sure who wants to take that, but jump in if you have a good answer for that one.
I think that's almost like asking a parent, which child do you like best?
Great point, Ellen.
We worked in education for the last 26 years, 28 years, I guess you could say. And I find it extraordinarily rewarding because I see the transformation that happens for an individual, for a family, for a community, and by extension, a whole neighborhood. But I'm sure that Kelly, who's worked in healthcare for many, many years, has seen personal life-giving transformations as a result of her work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really about affinity and where is your personal passion. For me, I came into healthcare through the door of being focused on cancer initially because it was personally important for me. And that has taken me to now being at a large healthcare system where I'm passionate about the neonatal intensive care unit and our behavioral health program. So it's really about finding your passion and directing it there. Because like my colleagues on the line who are in education, there's so much passion and affinity in working with students and working with parents of students, but you could also find that at a small community nonprofit that's helping homeless youth. So there is so much diversity and so much need within our communities that's why this is such an amazing field to go into, and it can be driven by your personal passion and affinity.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. And thank you, Ellen, for your answers to that rather challenging question. And then what seems to be our last question that's come in, unless anyone else has any that they'd like to put in, we can kind of continue on here, just a couple of minutes, is will this course be able to help me transition into the development field coming from a for-profit job? John, maybe you can take that one.
So I'll take that one. So for lots of the reasons that we've heard today, there are skill sets that you can have in a for-profit job that will have a big impact and be very directly applicable to work in the nonprofit field. I think what can make that sometimes a little bit challenging is when an individual doesn't know the language of fundraising or have a sense of best practice, and also when it is not clear what the commitment to fundraising is. So there was a great example earlier around being a volunteer, whether it be for an organization you want to work for or otherwise. That's a great way of showing a commitment to working and being involved with mission-oriented or nonprofit organizations. Another great way to do that is through education, through learning and understanding what the field and what the work is all about. I would say this course is definitely helpful for that, for the language, for the network that you build that Teresa talked about. And the last thing I would say is this course is very practical-oriented, skill development oriented. So you actually, within each module, as you're learning about different topics, you're doing an assignment that's not sort of in theory, but you're actually writing an appeal letter or coming up with a giving society or assessing a plain giving situation. And you can put together a portfolio of work that some students I've talked to over the years have then used out on the interview process. Again, it shows an understanding of the work of nonprofit and fundraising that you might not be able to from your direct work in the past.
Great, thank you, John. All right, and it doesn't look like at this time we have any further questions coming in. So with that, we would like to close the webinar today. So I'd like to thank you all again for tuning into our session today, and we hope the information presented and the advice from our panelists will help influence your current and future careers in philanthropy. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, we do have one more question that just came in here. I'll just do this last one here. It seemed to just come in immediately. Sorry about that. So is there a space in the program dedicated to trends or trajectory for the field in the future?
Yes, so throughout the course, it was referenced earlier on, we have discussion forums that are based on the specific topics of the module. But then what we found helpful is outside of the cohort that you're going through with the whole class and all the instructors, we have a couple forums that continue on throughout. And in those, we have one about exactly what you're mentioning about things trending in the industry. We also, during the live sessions that instructors teach, most of them will bring in thoughts on current trends as well during that period of time. So it is a best practice and has the opportunity to learn from each other and instructors on things going on out in the field.
Great, thank you, John, for answering that. I didn't want to miss our last question from him here, as I'm sure he wanted to get it in right under me saying that. So with that, we will close now. Thank you all again. Thank you to our panelists and John for your advice today. Just as a reminder, this session is recorded and will be sent in a follow-up email tomorrow to all of our registrants, so keep an eye on your inbox for that. And with that, I hope everyone has a pleasant afternoon and enjoyable rest of your week.
Thank you all.
Thank you.